the ones who refused to accept defeat. The story spread through the academy, then it spread beyond 3 years past. Jiho graduated from the academy in the top 10% of his class, not for superior physical abilities or advanced technical skills, but for what the instructors called adaptive combat philosophy. His bone knife was placed in the Academy's Hall of Legendary Weapons, displayed alongside plasma blades and graviton hammers. The plaque read simply, "A reminder that the warrior matters more than the weapon." Jiho became a captain in Earth's Coalition Expeditionary Force. Hana became an instructor specializing in human tactical doctrine. Daxril returned to his people and began teaching Krill warriors about persistence hunting techniques. Even Eris went home changed, teaching other Valdorians about what he called the human paradox, weakness that becomes strength through sheer refusal to acknowledge limitations. The academy changed too. They added a new training module called Primitive Warfare Techniques. Students now studied combat methods from dozens of species pre-industrial periods. The idea was revolutionary. What if modern warfare had forgotten important tactical wisdom? What if complete dependence on technology created vulnerabilities? Then the war started. The Scraith hierarchy appeared at the edge of Coalition space. They were aggressive, expansionist, and worst of all, they specialized in technological warfare. Their weapons emitted electromagnetic pulses that fried electronic systems. Their hackers infiltrated and corrupted military computers. Their tactics focused on turning the Coalition's advanced technology against itself. The first battles were disasters. Coalition fleets arrived with overwhelming firepower and lost because their own weapons stopped working. Ship computers crashed. Communication systems went dead. Advanced battle armor became dead weight when its power systems failed. In 3 months, the Coalition lost 40% of its fleet effectiveness, not through destruction, but through technical disruption. The Coalition Military Council met in emergency session. Generals and admirals from 100 worlds gathered to discuss the crisis. Their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. They had built an entire military around advanced technology. Now that technology was being used against them, they needed a solution fast, or the war would be lost. During the meeting, someone mentioned the Human Academy graduate who fought with a bone knife. It was meant as a joke, a moment of dark humor in a desperate situation, but it sparked something. What if they deployed units specifically trained to fight without technology? What if they had soldiers who could be effective when all the advanced systems failed? The idea was radical. Go backward to go forward. Train soldiers in low-tech warfare. Give them simple weapons that couldn't be hacked or disrupted. Teach them to fight like their ancestors did, before computers and energy weapons. It seemed crazy, but they were desperate. And desperate situations required desperate solutions. The request went to Earth Command. They needed human advisors. They needed warriors who understood persistence and adaptation. They needed the species that survived ice ages with sharpened stones. Captain Jiho received orders to report to Coalition headquarters immediately. When he arrived, he found himself in a room full of senior military officers who wanted to learn how to fight like primitives. He didn't teach them to use bone knives. That would be stupid. Instead, he taught them a philosophy. How to fight when your advantages are taken away. How to use terrain and psychology instead of superior firepower. How to make your enemy work harder than you do. How to outlast opponents who might be stronger but aren't as stubborn. The training program spread to military bases across Coalition space. Soldiers trained with backup weapons that didn't need power. Chemical propellant firearms. Kinetic weapons. Even simple blades and clubs for close combat. They practiced fighting in conditions where their normal advantages didn't exist. They learned to think differently about combat. The test came at Hadrian's Gate, a fortress world on the front lines. A Coalition garrison of 4,000 soldiers found themselves cut off and surrounded. The Scraith had deployed their full technological disruption suite. Communications were jammed. Advanced weapons were compromised. Vehicle systems were dead. By every tactical calculation, the garrison should surrender or be destroyed. The garrison commander was a Thurian named Commander Kessa. She had trained under Jiho's new program. When the advanced systems failed, she didn't panic. She ordered her troops to abandon compromised equipment and switch to backup weapons. Chemical firearms, kinetic launchers, close combat weapons. They had trained for this exact situation. The Scraith attacked with 12,000 soldiers. They expected quick victory against a technologically crippled enemy. Instead, they found soldiers who fought with determination that seemed insane. Every position was defended fiercely. Every attack was met with calculated resistance. The coalition troops used the terrain, used their knowledge of the fortress, used every advantage that didn't depend on computers or power cells. The siege lasted 47 days. The Scraith were used to quick technological victories. They didn't understand why this garrison wouldn't break. They had superior numbers. They had working technology while the defenders did not. By all logic, the fortress should have fallen in days. But logic didn't account for stubborn soldiers who simply refused to quit. Every assault was repelled. Sometimes barely, sometimes at terrible cost. The defenders lost ground slowly, fighting for every meter. They used traps that didn't need electronics. They used tactics that were thousands of years old. They made the Scraith pay for every advance, and most importantly, they endured. When coalition relief forces finally broke through the Scraith lines, they found the garrison still fighting. Battered and exhausted, but still fighting. Commander Kessa's report was simple. We remembered that soldiers existed before computers. We fought like they did. The Scraith didn't know how to handle that. The siege of Hadrian's Gate became a turning point. The coalition military realized they could fight the Scraith, not by matching their technological disruption, but by being able to fight effectively without technology. Units across coalition space began intensive low-tech combat training. Backup weapons became standard issue. Tactical doctrines changed to include contingencies for system failures. The Scraith found themselves facing an enemy that adapted faster than their disruption tactics could evolve. Coalition soldiers who could fight with advanced weapons when they worked, but who could switch to primitive methods when they didn't. Warriors who had learned the lesson Jiho taught with his bone knife. The weapon is just a tool. The warrior is what matters. The war lasted 3 more years. It wasn't won through overwhelming technological superiority. It was won through adaptation and persistence. The coalition learned to fight on multiple levels. High-tech when possible, low-tech when necessary, always focused on the fundamental principle: never give up. Never stop adapting. Never accept defeat as final. After the war ended, Jiho returned to the academy as a guest lecturer. The auditorium was packed with students from dozens of worlds. They were young and eager, ready to learn how to be warriors. He stood at the front of the hall and held up his original bone knife. It was scarred and worn now, but still functional. Your instructors will teach you to use the finest weapons in the galaxy, he told them. Learn those lessons well. Technology is powerful and important. Master it completely. But never forget this lesson: you are not your weapons. You are not your equipment. You are warriors. If you can fight with this primitive knife, then you can fight with anything. And if you can fight with anything, you can never truly be defeated. A young cadet raised her hand. She was from a species recently joined to the coalition. Captain Jiho, why did you choose bone specifically? Why not simple metal? That would be stronger. Jiho smiled. It was a good question. Because bone is what my ancestors had when they had nothing else. Bone and stone and stubbornness. That's how humans survived long enough to reach the stars. He walked along the front row, making eye contact with the students. Every species here has natural advantages. You have armor, or speed, or strength, or enhanced senses. Humans don't have those advantages. Our advantage is memory. We remember what it was like to have nothing. We remember how to survive when everything is against us, and that memory makes us dangerous. Not despite our weakness, but because of it. The lecture ended. Students filed out, talking among themselves in dozens of languages. But they all understood the core message. Being a warrior wasn't about having the best weapons or the most advanced technology. It was about having the mindset to continue fighting no matter what. It was about adaptation and persistence. It was about refusing to accept defeat. The tradition spread. Now, alongside their advanced weapons, coalition soldiers carried backup weapons, simple tools that couldn't be disrupted or hacked. They trained regularly in low-tech combat. Special forces units became experts in fighting without technological support. It became a point of pride, a symbol that they were more than their equipment. In fleet-ready rooms across coalition space, you could see it. Soldiers with plasma rifles also carrying simple kinetic weapons. Warriors with powered armor also trained in hand-to-hand combat. Pilots who could navigate with computers also knowing how to. 3 months passed since the weapon demonstration. The Academy continued its rigorous training schedule. Combat simulations, tactical exercises, weapons training. But something had changed in how the instructors taught. They started including scenarios where technology failed, where students had to adapt and survive without their advanced equipment. The biggest test came at the end of the semester: advanced survival training on a hostile world. The instructors announced it during morning assembly. All cadets would be dropped on Kepler 442f, a jungle planet with dangerous native life. The rules were simple but brutal. Survive for 7 days with only your forged weapon and basic survival gear. No communication devices. No rescue unless you were critically injured. Teams were assigned randomly. Jiho found himself grouped with Daxril, a Thurian named Rock, and a Valdorian cadet named Eris. The Valdorians were known for two things: their physical superiority and their arrogance. Eris had both qualities in abundance. He had made his opinions about humans very clear throughout the semester. He thought they were weak. He thought they didn't belong in the academy. The dropship carried them through Kepler 442f's atmosphere. Through the windows they could see dense jungle stretching to the horizon. The gravity was 1.3 times Earth standard, heavy for humans but manageable. The air was breathable but humid and thick. The ship's sensors showed large heat signatures moving through the jungle. Native predators, they landed in a clearing. The door opened and hot, wet air rushed in. The smell of vegetation and decay was overwhelming. The pilot's voice came through the speaker. 7 days. Good luck. Then the ship lifted off, leaving them alone in the alien jungle. The first 3 days went well enough. Daxril's 6 arms made him excellent at building shelter. Rock's massive strength helped clear space and move heavy logs. Jiho used his survival knowledge to find water and identify which plants were safe. Even Eris contributed, using his advanced energy lance to hunt for food. But Eris made his feelings clear. He barely spoke to Jiho. When he did, his tone was dismissive. "Try not to slow us down, human," he said while sharpening his energy lance. "This is real survival, not your little demonstration with training drones." Jiho said nothing. Words wouldn't change Eris's mind. Only actions would. On the 4th day, everything changed. The ground started shaking. At first, it was just a small tremor. Then it got worse. The trees swayed violently. Rocks began sliding down the nearby hillside. "Earthquake!" Rock shouted. "Get to open ground!" They ran, but the jungle was dense. The shaking got stronger. Then the hillside above them collapsed. Tons of rock and mud came crashing down. The team scattered in different directions. Jiho dove behind a large tree as debris flew past him. The roar of the landslide was deafening. It seemed to last forever, but probably only took 30 seconds. When it finally stopped, dust and dirt filled the air so thick he could barely see. He called out for the others. Daxril's voice answered from somewhere to the left. Rock's deeper voice came from further away. But there was no response from Eris. Jiho started searching, moving carefully through the debris. The landslide had changed the entire landscape. Trees were knocked down. New boulders sat where jungle had been moments before. He found Eris 15 minutes later. The Valdorian was trapped against a rock face by fallen trees. His leg was bleeding, a deep cut from something sharp. Worse, his energy lance lay broken nearby, its power cell cracked and leaking. The weapon was useless. And around Eris, in a loose circle, were 3 native predators. The creatures looked like wolves, but with 6 legs instead of 4. Bone ridges ran down their spines like serrated blades. Their eyes were intelligent and calculating. They had found injured prey and were working together to bring it down. Eris was trying to stand, but couldn't put weight on his injured leg. He was helpless. Jiho assessed the situation in seconds. 3 predators, each weighing over 100 kilos. 1 injured Valdorian, 1 human with a bone knife. Any tactical computer would calculate this as a complete loss. The correct action would be to retreat, find the others, and return with help. But by then, Eris would be dead. And Jiho had never been good at accepting the correct action when it meant abandoning someone. He picked up a rock and threw it, hitting one of the predators in the side. The creature yelped and spun around, seeing him for the first time. All 3 predators turned their attention to this new threat. Jiho pulled his bone knife and took a position with his back to a large boulder. He couldn't be surrounded here. He had one advantage: position. The predators spread out, trying to flank him. Jiho grabbed a piece of resinous wood from their camp supplies and lit it with his emergency fire starter. The flame caught quickly. He waved the burning torch at the nearest predator. The creature backed up, confused by the fire. Animals on many worlds feared fire. These were no exception. But they didn't retreat completely. They were hungry and determined. The alpha predator growled, a sound that vibrated through Jiho's chest. Then it charged. Jiho waited until the last moment, then stepped aside and struck with his knife. The blade cut deep into the creature's foreleg, severing tendons. The predator screamed and stumbled, its leg useless. The second predator attacked while he was focused on the first. Jiho barely saw it in time. He raised the torch and the flames caught the creature's face. It pulled back, pawing at its burned snout. Jiho used that moment to strike again, this time cutting across one of the predator's eyes. The creature howled and retreated, partially blinded. 2 predators wounded. One still healthy. But the healthy one was learning. It watched Jiho carefully, seeing how he moved. It was smart enough to be cautious. It circled, looking for an opening. Jiho kept moving, keeping his back protected, the torch ready, his knife held in a defensive position. The standoff lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. The wounded predators were bleeding and in pain. The healthy one was calculating whether these 2 small creatures were worth the effort. Jiho made noise, banging his knife against the rock, making himself seem bigger and more dangerous than he was. Finally, the alpha predator made a decision. It growled at the others and they began to back away. Slowly at first, then faster. Within a minute, they had disappeared into the jungle. The fight was over. Prey that fought back this hard wasn't worth the energy cost. There was easier food elsewhere. Jiho waited another full minute before lowering his guard. He was breathing hard. His muscles ached from the tension. He had cuts on his arms from glancing blows he barely remembered receiving. But he was alive. And so was Eris. He turned to the Valdorian. Eris was staring at him with an expression Jiho had never seen on his face before. It might have been shock, or respect, or fear, maybe all 3. "You're insane," Eris said, his voice barely a whisper. "Fighting 3 predators with a knife made from bone. You're completely insane." Jiho shook his head. "I'm human. There's a difference." He moved to examine Eris's leg. The cut was deep but not life-threatening if treated properly. He pulled out his basic medical kit and began cleaning the wound. "Hold still. This will hurt." He used local plants he had identified earlier. Some had antiseptic properties. Others helped stop bleeding. The academy had taught them to use local resources when standard medical supplies weren't available. He worked quickly and efficiently, wrapping the wound with strips from Eris's spare clothing. Daxril and Rock found them an hour later. The Krill warrior took one look at the scene and understood what had happened. The blood, the predator tracks, Eris's broken weapon, Jiho's small wounds. He placed one of his 6 hands on Jiho's shoulder, a gesture of deep respect in his culture. He said nothing. Words weren't necessary. They made camp there for the night, not wanting to move Eris too far with his injury. They activated the emergency beacon for medical extraction. While they waited, Eris kept looking at Jiho. Finally, he spoke. "I said humans were weak. I said you didn't belong in the academy." He paused. "I was wrong." Jiho poked at the fire, not looking at the Valdorian. "You weren't completely wrong. Humans are weak compared to most species. We're slow. We don't have natural weapons or armor. We have no special senses." He looked up at Eris. "But we have something else. We don't know when to quit. We just keep fighting until we win or we die. Usually we outlast whatever is trying to kill us." Eris was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "That's not weakness. That's the most terrifying kind of strength." He looked at his broken energy lance. "I relied on my weapon. When it failed, I was helpless. You rely on yourself. Your weapon is just a tool. If it breaks, you find another way. That's what warriors should be." The extraction ship arrived the next morning. Eris was taken to the medical bay. The rest of the team completed their 7 days without further incidents. But when they returned to the academy, Eris did something unprecedented. In front of the entire assembled student body, he publicly thanked Jiho for saving his life. "I judged this human by my species standards," Eris said, his voice carrying through the hall. "I called him weak because he lacked our physical advantages. But he defeated 3 predators when I, with all my advantages, was helpless. This is a lesson I will never forget. Strength comes in many forms, and sometimes the most dangerous opponents are." As Jiho walked back to his place among the students, he noticed how they looked at him now. The days after the demonstration were different. Jiho walked through the academy halls and noticed the change immediately. Students who had ignored him before now nodded when he passed. Some even moved aside to let him through, a sign of respect in many warrior cultures. The human with the bone knife had become someone worth acknowledging. In the training halls, other cadets watched him practice. They studied his movements with serious attention. They saw how he never wasted energy, how every step had a purpose, how he could turn an opponent's strength against them. Some tried to copy his style, but they quickly learned it wasn't about the movements alone. It was about a different way of thinking about combat. Daxril was the first to approach him directly. The massive Krill found Jiho in the mess hall during the evening meal. His translator converted his chittering sounds into words. "I have trained with 17 different weapons masters," Daxril said. "From 17 different worlds. None of them taught what you showed us, that the weapon is not the source of power. The warrior is." Jiho gestured for him to sit. Daxril lowered his large body onto the bench across from him. The Krill's 6 arms moved restlessly, a sign he was thinking. "My plasma blade is powerful," he continued, "but it needs energy cells. It needs maintenance. In a long fight, far from support, what happens when it fails? Then you fight without it," Jiho said simply. "Your body is a weapon. Your mind is a weapon. The blade is just a tool to make those weapons more effective." He took a bite of his food before continuing. "My people learned this because we had to. We didn't have natural weapons like your armor or strength. We had to be smart. We had to be adaptable. That's how we survived." Daxril's antenna moved, and what Jiho had learned was a sign of understanding. "Your species was prey once. Before you became hunters, it wasn't a question." Jiho nodded. "For most of our evolution, yes. We were food for larger, stronger animals. We survived by being clever and by never giving up. Even when we were wounded, even when we were outnumbered. We just kept going until the predators got tired or made a mistake." The Krill warrior sat quietly for a moment. Then he stood. "Thank you for this lesson, Jiho. I will think about what you said." He walked away, his heavy steps echoing through the hall. Jiho noticed that several other students had been listening. Word would spread. It always did. Lythe came to find him in the academy library the next day. The Silverin moved silently, her thin limbs barely making a sound. Jiho only knew she was there when she sat down across from him. Her large compound eyes reflected the light from the data screens. "I've been watching recordings of your fight," she said without greeting. Directness was normal for her species. You moved like prey that knows it's being hunted. Using cover, staying out of direct lines of fire, making yourself hard to target. She tilted her head in a way that meant curiosity. "But you also moved like a predator, patient, waiting for the right moment to strike." "That's exactly right," Jiho said, looking up from his studies. "Humans are both. We remember what it was like to be hunted. That memory keeps us careful, keeps us aware of danger. But we also learned how to hunt. How to track prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. How to work together to bring down animals much larger than us." Lythe's antenna twitched. "My people evolved as ambush hunters. We strike fast and from hiding. If the first strike fails, we retreat. We don't chase. We don't persist." She looked at her hands, built for precision and speed. "What you do? That persistence. It's alien to us. But effective? Very effective. Different strategies for different species," Jiho said. "Your way works for you. My way works for me. The important thing is understanding why we fight the way we do. Then we can adapt when needed." Lythe made a sound that might have been agreement and left, moving back into the shadows between the shelves. But the most important conversation came 3 days later. Instructor Varric summoned Jiho to his private office. The room was simple for someone of his rank. Weapons on the walls, most of them old, battle honors displayed without ceremony, a desk covered in tactical reports. This was the room of a warrior, not a bureaucrat. "Sit," Varric said, pointing to a chair. Jiho sat. The instructor studied him with all 4 eyes for a long moment before speaking. "When you chose that bone, I thought you were being stubborn, refusing to adapt to superior technology. I thought you were making a statement about human pride." He stood and walked to a locked cabinet on the wall. "I was wrong. You weren't refusing to adapt. You were showing us that real adaptation doesn't mean abandoning what works. It means understanding when simplicity is stronger than complexity." He opened the cabinet and removed something carefully wrapped in cloth. Varric unwrapped the cloth to reveal an old blade. It looked like it was made from sharpened chitin, similar to the armor that covered parts of his body. The blade was worn but well maintained. It was clearly ancient. "This is a Velketh hook blade," he said softly. "My people used them for 10,000 years before we discovered plasma technology." He held the blade up to the light. "I haven't carried this in 40 standard cycles. I thought it was obsolete, a relic. But after watching you fight, I remembered something. This blade never failed my ancestors. It never ran out of power. It never needed repairs. It just worked. Every time. In any condition." The instructor carefully rewrapped the blade and put it back in the cabinet. Then he turned to face Jiho directly. "The Coalition has become dependent on technology. Our weapons need power cells. Our armor needs computer systems. Our ships need constant maintenance. What happens when our enemy learns to disrupt these systems? What happens when we have to fight without our advantages?" Jiho understood immediately. "We become vulnerable. We've forgotten how to fight without technology." Varex nodded. "Exactly. Your demonstration reminded me of something important. The warrior who can fight without power, without systems, without support, that warrior is never truly defeated. They can always find a way to continue." He sat down behind his desk. "I'm recommending changes to our training program. Not abandoning advanced weapons, but adding survival combat training. Teaching students to fight when everything fails. Using your demonstration as the foundation." He paused. "I hope you don't mind." Jiho felt a mix of pride and responsibility. "I don't mind, instructor. But I should tell you something. I'm not special. Any human could have done what I did. This is how we think. How we've always thought. We prepare for the worst and hope for the best. We assume our equipment will fail and train to fight anyway." Varex's eyes narrowed in what might have been a smile. "That's why this lesson is important. Most species never think about fighting without their advantages. They rely on being stronger, faster, or better equipped. Humans rely on something else. What would you call it?" Jiho thought about his ancestors. About humans who survived ice ages and droughts, who crossed oceans and deserts, who faced extinction and refused to accept it. "Stubbornness," he said finally. "We're too stubborn to quit. Even when we should. Even when it makes no sense. We just keep going." The instructor stood and walked Jiho to the door. Before opening it, he said one more thing. "There's a xenopsychology paper circulating through the Coalition networks. It's about human warfare. The title is interesting. The Apex Prey-Predator Phenomenon. It argues that humans are uniquely dangerous because you evolved as both hunter and hunted. You understand survival from both perspectives." He opened the door. "It's becoming required reading at military academies across the Coalition. Your little demonstration with a bone knife has made people think about humans differently, not as a weak species trying to catch up, but as something much more concerning. A species that knows how to survive anything." Jiho walked back through the academy halls. He noticed the looks from other students had changed again. Not just respect now, something else mixed in. A kind of careful wariness, like they were looking at something that seemed harmless but might be dangerous if provoked. Hana was waiting for him near his quarters. She fell into step beside him. "I heard Varex called you in." "What did he want?" Jiho told her about the conversation, about the old blade, about the changes coming to the training program. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You know what you've done, right? You've changed how the entire galaxy sees us. Before they thought humans were trying to prove we could compete with advanced weapons. Now they're wondering what else we can do that they never considered." Jiho shrugged. "I just showed them something humans have always known. When you don't have advantages, you make do with what you have. When you can't rely on superior strength or technology, you rely on your brain and your refusal to quit. It's not complicated." "Maybe not complicated," Hana said. "But apparently it's revolutionary to everyone else." She smiled slightly. "I chose advanced technology to prove we belong. You chose a bone to prove we've always belonged. Different approaches. Both worked." They reached Jiho's door. Before going inside, he looked back at his classmate and friend. "We both proved something important. You showed that humans can master their technology. I showed that we don't need it to be dangerous. Together, that sends a message." The demonstration hall was full. Every student had gathered to present their weapons. The air buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Outside the tall windows, the neutron star spun, casting strange shadows across the room. Today, they would all show what they had created. Today, they would prove themselves as warriors. The first presentations were impressive. Daxril stepped forward with his plasma blade. When he activated it, the entire room filled with blue light. The blade hummed with barely controlled power. He walked to the testing area and swung at a metal plate. The plate was made from starship armor, thick enough to stop most weapons. The plasma blade cut through it like it was paper. The two pieces fell to the floor with a heavy crash. The students watching made sounds of approval in their various languages. Lythe went next. Her rifle was elegant and deadly. She stood at one end of the hall and fired at targets that appeared randomly across the space. The targets were small and moved fast, designed to be almost impossible to hit. She hit 30 targets in less than 3 seconds. Each shot was perfect. Each target fell. When she finished, even Instructor Varex nodded with approval. Borthen's demonstration was dramatic. His hammer was as tall as he was, and he was already massive. When he swung it at the ground, the impact created a shockwave that knocked over practice dummies 10 meters away. The floor cracked under the force. Some students had to steady themselves against the walls. This was the weapon of someone who didn't need subtlety. This was pure, overwhelming power. Hana presented her vibration blade with confidence. When activated, it moved so fast it became almost invisible. She demonstrated on various materials, showing how it could cut through almost anything by disrupting the molecular bonds. It was sophisticated technology, well executed. She caught Jiho's eye as she finished, her expression saying, "See? This is how humans can compete," more students presented. Each weapon was a marvel of engineering. Energy shields, gravity manipulators, smart weapons that could track targets on their own. The demonstrations went on for hours. The weapons got more impressive, more powerful, more expensive. By the time Jiho's turn came, the audience had seen weapons that could level buildings or shoot through walls. Instructor Varex called his name. "Cadet Jiho, present your weapon." The room got quiet, but it wasn't a respectful quiet. It was the quiet of people waiting to see something fail. Everyone remembered the bone. Everyone remembered the mockery. Now they would see if the human's strange choice had any merit at all. Jiho walked to the center of the hall. He carried his bone knife openly. Under the hall's bright lights, it looked even simpler than before. No glow, no hum, no special effects. Just a piece of polished bone with a sharp edge. Next to the advanced weapons that came before it, it looked like something from a museum, something ancient and outdated. He stopped in the center and held the knife up for everyone to see. Then he began to speak. His voice was steady and clear. "This knife is made from a bone that is 60 million years old. The creature it came from lived and died long before my species even existed. But the bone survived. That's the first lesson. Real strength isn't just about power. It's about lasting." He walked slowly as he talked, letting everyone see the weapon. "This knife has no power source. No batteries. No energy cells. It won't run out of power in the middle of a fight. It won't stop working if someone uses an electromagnetic pulse. It won't malfunction in extreme heat or cold. It works the same way in a desert, in space, or underwater. That's the second lesson. The simplest tool is often the most reliable." Some students shifted uncomfortably. They had spent weeks building weapons that depended on power sources and complex systems. Jiho's words made them think about what would happen if those systems failed. "The third lesson," Jiho continued, "is about what makes a warrior. You've all seen amazing weapons today. Weapons that can destroy almost anything. But a weapon is just a tool. The warrior using it is what matters. My ancestors survived for 200,000 years with tools like this. They weren't the strongest creatures on Earth. They weren't the fastest. But they were the smartest and the most persistent. They never gave up. This knife reminds me of that." A Krill officer watching from the observation area made a sound through his translator. "Interesting philosophy, human. But can you actually use it?" Philosophy doesn't win fights. The challenge was clear. Talk was easy. Now he had to prove the bone knife actually worked. Jiho nodded. "I understand. I'll need a sparring partner." He looked around the room. Daxril started to step forward, all 6 arms ready. But Jiho shook his head. "I need someone skilled who won't accidentally hurt me." He turned to Hana. "Will you help?" Hana looked surprised, but she stepped into the arena. She activated her vibration blade. It hummed with power, the air around it shimmering from the ultrasonic frequencies. She and Jiho had trained together before. She knew his style. But she also knew her weapon was technologically superior in every way. This should be a quick demonstration. They bowed to each other, following the Academy's formal combat protocols. Then they began. Hana attacked first, her blade singing through the air. She was fast and precise, but Jiho didn't try to match her speed. Instead, he moved with careful economy. Every step served a purpose. Every motion was controlled. When Hana's blade came at him, he didn't block it straight on. He deflected it, turning her force aside rather than opposing it directly. When she swung high, he ducked low. When she came from the left, he moved right. He never wasted energy fighting force with force. He was like water, flowing around obstacles rather than crashing through them. The watching students began to notice something. Jiho wasn't just defending. He was controlling the fight. Each deflection moved Hana slightly off balance. Each dodge put him in a better position. He was reading her movements, anticipating her attacks. His bone knife touched her vibration blade several times, and each time the bone held. The ancient material didn't shatter or crack. It redirected the force, its curved shape and dense structure spreading the impact. Then Jiho changed tactics. He stopped just defending and started to press forward. His knife became more than just a blade. He used it to hook Hana's wrist, to trap her arm, to create openings in her defense. The bone knife slipped past her guard in ways a larger blade couldn't. It was small enough to be quick, but heavy enough to have impact. 30 seconds into the match, Jiho had the knife at Hana's throat. He had pulled the strike at the last moment, of course. The training safeties were on. But the point was clear. He had won. With a piece of bone against advanced technology, he had won. The hall was completely silent. Hana stepped back, breathing hard but smiling slightly. She knew what had just happened. Jiho had just taught the entire academy a lesson about the difference between having a good weapon and being a good warrior. But Instructor Varex wasn't finished. Impressive, cadet. Now demonstrate against combat drones. 3 autonomous fighting machines activated around the arena. They were programmed with advanced combat algorithms. They had defeated 90% of the students who trained against them. Their weapons were set to stun, but their tactics were ruthless. The drones spread out surrounding Jiho. They moved with mechanical precision, their sensors tracking his every movement. Then they attacked together, coordinating their assault perfectly. Most students would have been overwhelmed in seconds. But Jiho didn't fight the way the drones expected. He used the environment. When one drone fired, he was already moving, putting a support pillar between himself and the shot. When another drone tried to flank him, he vaulted over a bench, staying out of its firing line. He picked up a training dummy and threw it at the third drone, disrupting its targeting systems for a crucial second. The drones were armored and shielded. A direct attack on their main bodies would do nothing, but Jiho didn't attack their bodies. He struck at their joints, at their sensor clusters, at their exposed wiring. The bone knife, thin and sharp, slipped into gaps that energy weapons couldn't reach. It severed control cables and punctured hydraulic lines. The first drone fell in 15 seconds, its leg servo cut. It tried to adjust but couldn't move properly. The second drone lasted 20 seconds before Jiho blinded its optical sensors with a precise strike. The third drone tried to learn from what happened to the others. It adapted its tactics, but Jiho adapted faster. He used the disabled first drone as a distraction, pushing it toward the third drone. In the moment of confusion, he closed the distance and struck at the power coupling on the drone's back. All 3 drones lay inactive on the floor. The entire fight had taken less than a minute. The silence in the hall broke. Students began talking all at once in dozens of languages. The translators couldn't keep up with all the conversations. But the message was clear. They had just watched something that shouldn't have been possible. A primitive weapon defeating advanced combat drones. A human with a bone knife showing them all what it really meant to be a warrior. Instructor Varex walked forward. His 4 eyes studied Jiho with new respect. You have taught us something valuable today, cadet. A lesson we had perhaps forgotten. Technology makes us powerful, but skill, intelligence, and determination make us warriors. Well done. Part 1. The space station hung in orbit around a dying star. Its metal walls gleamed under the strange purple light. Inside, 200 young warriors from across the galaxy walked through corridors that hummed with power. This was the Velthar Academy, the most respected military school in known space. Only the best came here. Only the strongest survived. Jiho walked alone through the crowded halls. He was human, which made him different. Humans were new to the galactic community. Most species looked at them with curiosity, like children examining a strange insect. Humans had no natural armor like the krill. They had no enhanced senses like the silverin. They were not large and strong like the thurians. They were just ordinary. At least that's what everyone thought. The training hall was massive. High ceilings disappeared into shadows. Advanced machines lined the walls, each one capable of creating weapons that could cut through starship hulls. Energy fields shimmered in containment units. Rare metals from a dozen worlds sat in storage racks. This was where the students would forge their weapons, the tools that would define their warrior paths. Instructor Varex stood at the front of the room. He was old by any species standard, his body marked with scars from countless battles. His 4 eyes scanned the assembled students with the look of someone who had seen too many young warriors fail. When he spoke, his voice carried through the hall without effort. "You have been given access to the finest materials in the galaxy," he said. "Your assignment is simple. Forge a weapon that represents your warrior philosophy. This weapon will be judged not by its power alone, but by what it says about you. You have 6 weeks. Begin." The room exploded into activity. Students rushed toward the material storage units. Daxril, a krill with 6 powerful arms, claimed the plasma edge alloys first. His species were natural warriors, their bodies covered in hard shell-like armor. He moved with confidence, already knowing what weapon he would create. Lith, a silverin with large compound eyes, selected precision targeting crystals. Her people were known for their incredible vision and reaction time. She could see things moving faster than most species could think. Her weapon would be a rifle, naturally. Borthan, massive and strong, picked up materials for a hammer. He was Thurian, a species so tough they could survive in the vacuum of space for short periods. Their bones were stronger than most metals. His weapon would match his size and strength. Hana, the other human in the class, chose carefully. She took materials for a vibration blade, something that would show humans could work with advanced technology. She caught Jiho's eye across the room and gave him a small smile. They were the only 2 humans here. That created a bond, even though they had different approaches to everything. Jiho waited until the rush ended. He walked past the gleaming metals and humming power cells. He walked past the advanced alloys and smart materials. He went to a different storage area, one most students never visited. The biological materials vault was quiet and cold. Inside were organic samples from thousands of worlds, preserved plants, crystallized resins, and bones. He found what he was looking for in a container marked with Earth's symbol. It was a bone from an ancient creature, something that lived millions of years before humans even existed. The label said it came from a titanoboa, a giant snake from Earth's prehistoric past. The bone was dense and heavy. It had survived millions of years. Jiho signed it out and carried it back to his work area. The other students stared. Then they started laughing. Daxril's translator made clicking sounds that meant amusement. "The human takes garbage," the translation said. "When he could have power, he chooses trash." Lyth's large eyes focused on him with what might have been pity. "That bone will break the first time you use it," she said. Her voice was kind, but her words were not encouraging. Even Hana came over, worried. "Jiho, what are you doing?" "We're trying to prove humans belong here. This makes us look primitive." She kept her voice low so others wouldn't hear. Jiho just nodded. He understood their concerns. But he had made his choice. "I know what I'm doing," he said quietly. Hana looked at him for a long moment, then walked away, shaking her head. Instructor Varex watched all of this. His face showed nothing, but his eyes lingered on Jiho and the bone for a moment longer than necessary. Then he turned away to help other students with their projects. While other students used advanced machines that could shape matter at the molecular level, Jiho requested simple tools: files, grinding stones, sandpaper. The equipment manager looked confused but provided them. These were tools from the museum section, things that civilizations used before they discovered advanced technology. Jiho set up his work area in a quiet corner. He laid out his tools in a neat row. He examined the bone carefully, turning it over in his hands. He could feel its weight, its density. This bone had survived millions of years buried in Earth's soil. It had turned to stone in a way. It was stronger than it looked. He picked up a file and began to work. The sound was rhythmic and steady. Scrape, scrape, scrape. While other workstations hummed with energy and glowed with holographic displays, his corner was filled with the old sound of metal against stone. It was a sound humans had been making for hundreds of thousands of years. Days passed. Other students finished their projects quickly. The advanced machines could create a weapon in hours. Daxril completed his plasma blade in 3 days. It glowed with barely contained energy. Lath's rifle took 5 days, and when she tested it in the practice range, it hit targets too small for most species to even see. Orthan's hammer was finished in a week. When he swung it, the air itself seemed to shake. Jiho kept working on his bone. Every evening after regular training, he returned to his corner. His hands developed calluses from the tools. His muscles ached from the repetitive motion. But slowly, very slowly, the bone began to change shape. The rough surface became smooth. The irregular shape found a purpose. It was becoming a blade. The mockery faded into curiosity. Some students began stopping by to watch him work. They didn't understand what he was doing, but there was something about his patience, his focus, that caught their attention. He never hurried.
He never seemed frustrated.
He just worked, steady and calm, as if he had all the time in the world. Bex, a young Silveran, asked him one evening, "Why do you work so slowly?" "The machines could do in minutes what takes you hours." Jiho didn't stop filing as he answered, "My ancestors made tools like this for 200,000 years. They survived ice ages and hunted creatures much larger and stronger than them. They did it with patience. I'm just remembering how." The 6th week arrived. Jiho's blade was nearly finished. It was about 20 centimeters long, curved slightly for better cutting. The edge caught the light with a sharpness that seemed impossible for bone. The handle was wrapped in cord in a pattern that looked simple but felt perfect in the hand. It wouldn't slip, even wet with blood or sweat. On the final day, Jiho used a laser etcher for the only technological part of his project. He carved words into the blade's spine, first in Korean characters, then in English so everyone could read it. The word was simple: endure. That was his warrior philosophy. Not to be the strongest or the fastest, just to endure longer than everything else. When he finished, he held the knife up to the light. It looked simple next to the glowing, humming weapons of his classmates. It had no power source. It couldn't fire energy beams or generate force fields. It was just a sharp piece of ancient bone. But it was his, and it was ready.